Hello and welcome back. I'm DMAC and this is part 4 of my custom pick build. If you haven't seen the previous episodes, I'll link back to the first episode up there so you can catch up if you want to. So what we've got is the handles already, the steel has been polished and is all covered up under this masking tape. We've got some pins here ready to go, they'll slide through there, catching those holes in the steel and pinning it all together. So in this episode, to start off, we're going to epoxy it. So just a couple of bits here you need for the epoxying. I've got a couple of stirrers here, sacrificial stirrers, I think. It's the Gorilla Glue comes with its own little handy spatula. If you want to use that, you can use that. I'm using Gorilla Glue Clear Epoxy, sets in 5 minutes. Quite expensive stuff. I think you can use no-name stuff and it works just as well, so I should probably invest in some of that. And we've got some clips here and we're going to use those once we've put everything together, got everything together. We can just use these clips in various places just to hold it all together until it dries. Now I used to use these slidey kind of ratchet clamps and they're great, but even these ones, these are quite small. It's difficult depending on where you've put your pins in your picks. It's difficult to kind of fit them on and not kind of disturb those pins. So recently I went over, I can't remember who it was on the Facebook group Custom Lockpick Makers, check it out if you're not already there, but they recommended these Bulldog clips and they're really quite versatile and certainly seem to be a favourite. So what else are we going to need? The only other thing you're going to need is some rubber gloves. So what ones are these? These are nitrile medical gloves. It gets very messy. I've actually got some paper on my work table here, so I'm going to mix up the glue pretty much here, and that means I could just make a real mess here, not worry about it too much. Once the pick's all glued up, I'll leave it to dry for a while, and I can just sort of tear all of this up and throw it in the bin once all the rubbish, throw it in the bin once I'm finished. So let's get to epoxying. Alright, first thing is gloves on. I think I did this once, it was the first time I did it without gloves. I just got epoxy everywhere. It's not nice to get off your hands. You can see my pliers there are coated in epoxy from doing previous picks. So let's break this tip off. And don't need too much really. Most of it kind of gets squeezed out anyway. Put that cap back on. I think there's an orientation. There we go. Right, it's a 5-minute epoxy, but it takes quite a while to go off really. We haven't got too much of a rush. Very important to get it mixed up really, really well. Okay, that should be about right. I'm just going to cover that all over this handle. Make a right mess. Make sure everything's covered. And then slide them into the handles. You can see most of the epoxy is kind of getting pushed off there. But I'm just going to use the steel to mix it all in. Make sure it's gone into that little partial tang slot. Because really we want every surface to be coated in that epoxy so we get a really good bond. And because we masked it all off, I can be pretty liberal with this glue. Make sure it's going into all of those holes. I'll cover these pins with it as well. This is where it starts getting all over your fingers. And we've put those little bits of paper towel in there, so it shouldn't fill up these brass tubes. That's nice and snug, that is. There we go, it's all epoxied. I think that looks pretty good to me. Make sure we've got plenty in there. As you can see there, where that tang, where the metal comes out, we've got loads sitting in there at the moment. I'm just going to use this to scrape as much of it out. The rest of the pick handle, I'll take the masking tape off, we'll sort of sand it down. But we want to get as much as we can off, because it really will help in the long run. Alright, that looks pretty good. Now we'll use a couple of these clamps. So I'll put maybe one on the front there, one in the middle there, and perhaps one at the back there. And that's holding it pretty securely. As you can appreciate, these clamps are going to stick to this pick and that epoxy is going to set. So what I tend to do is leave it like this for about 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, this starts to become really tacky. Certainly unworkable to stick anything together, but we can just take these off and reposition them and make sure that they're not going to end up stuck to that. I mean, they will come off because they're sticking to the masking tape essentially. But yeah, I'm going to leave that to dry for 5 minutes. I'll just release those clamps, make sure they're not stuck. After sort of 5 minutes, just make sure they're not stuck. And I'm going to leave this overnight. I know it says that it's a 5-minute epoxy, but we want it to completely go off. So I'm going to leave it overnight, and then we'll come back to it and we can take these off, peel everything off and see what we're left with, and hopefully then we can just finish up that handle and get some finishing oils on it. Looking forward to it. See you in a bit. The epoxy is all dry, so we'll get rid of these clips. And I've got to take all this masking tape off, and before I do that I'll probably saw these brass tubes almost flush, not quite, because I don't want to damage the wood. But you know, I've got a really nice little saw at home that I use for challenge lock serrations, and it's great for doing these. Unfortunately I don't have that, I've just got a hacksaw today, but that should do. So let's use this bench hook, and if I wedge our pick in there, we should be able to cut most of this off. Much easier with that little saw, but that's all I've got here, unfortunately. I'm just going to have to manage. Job done. As you can see, we've got our paper in there, and hopefully that epoxy didn't seep in there too far. Unblock the holes. Perfect, can see all the way through. Same again on that side. Very nice. Right, so I think the next thing is to take all of this masking tape off, which is sometimes really easy, but other times when the epoxy's dried on, it can be a real pain in the arse. So let's get that done. So that wasn't too bad. In the past it's been worse than that, but it has been better. As you can see, most of the handle was covered up, so we just got epoxy on the tang line there and just around these holes, and hopefully it's filled those little imperfections, but we'll see in a minute. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this on the belt sander and just flatten this brass back down. I found that's the easiest way to do it. You can use a file, but I feel like I've got more control of the belt sander than I do on a file, and I don't want to risk digging into this wood and then having to take more of it off. So just pushing it flat on the belt sander helps to take that off. After that, I'm going to pop him in the vise probably and just work at the tang line with some sandpaper. Probably that 240 that we used. Those little strips, these strips here, and then I'll also, again, kind of go over it and just make sure that I'm really happy with this shape. Finish that little tip off, and then it should be time to get some oil on it. So I've been going at that with the 240 and it's looking pretty nice. I've got a couple of burrs just on the inside of these brass tubes, so what I like to do is just get a drill bit, very gently, just run it back and forth, and it just gives a very slight bevel to the inner edge of the tube. It just gets rid of those rough edges. That looks a little bit nicer. So yeah, our tang line is looking nice and shiny. I think the shape, I've been working on that tip as well, just to kind of shape it off there. I didn't want to round it off completely. I quite like that shape that's on it now. So I think what I'm going to do, we've got a little bit of 800 here. I'm just going to work on this tang line just a little bit, just to kind of polish it up a bit. Got to have that being nice and shiny, don't we? And same again for those brass inserts. Looking nice, and it's starting to feel really, really smooth now. We could stop here and just go straight for the oil, but I like my picks to be really, really smooth. So we'll probably move on to these micro mesh pads in a sec. So that's the harshest one, which is a little bit abrasive. So I'm just going to go over the whole pick with that. And as well as smoothing out all of the wood, it's also going to polish up that metal. We already see a shine on that, can't we? And it will polish up this metal nicely and finish it off really well. So I think I'll carry on and do that, speed you up a little bit as I do. So I don't think there's any need to go any finer than that. We're already starting to get a bit of a polish on this. But we want the oil to the wood to soak up the oil. So what I'll do is just give it a bit of a spray with alcohol just to clean it up. Yeah, it's looking nice and shiny, I think. I think we're probably ready to go for the teak oil. Okay, teak oil, here we come. So there's various ways to finish the wood. I'm going to go for some of this. It's just some cheap teak oil. I think this says 14 hours drying time for each coat. But I think that's if you're building up a level of teak oil, which we're not really doing. We just want to protect this wood. So I'll probably go for 2 dips on this one. And the way I do it, rather than brushing it on, is just put a bend and a little bit of wire like that, just to hold onto our pick. And we'll do the sheep dip style and just dip the whole thing in there and let him marinate just for a couple of seconds. I'll get some paper towel ready for when he comes out. I'm no expert at all in wood finishing, you can probably tell that. But I know what works for me and what gets me the results that I like, so that's kind of what I do it. There's plenty of different ways you can go about doing it, but this kind of works for me. You can already see as soon as you put the teak oil on, you get a much nicer colour. It's like when you wet a stone at the beach, you get those colours coming out of it. So I'm just going to take off the excess here, just very lightly brushing it with a cloth. And we want to give this a chance to soak in. Now, as I say on the bottle, it says 14 hours between coats. And I'm probably going to leave it overnight, actually. I'll let it sit overnight. I'll dip it again. I'll probably let that sit overnight. And then we'll come back and we'll carry on finishing off. So we've had a couple of coats of the teak oil, been dunked in there twice and left overnight, and it's looking pretty nice. Once again, we could probably leave it here, but I like them to be quite shiny, so I think I'm going to add some beeswax to this. I think, as I say, I'm no expert on wood finishes. This kind of does the same stuff as the teak oil. It does sort of nourish and protect the wood, but this kind of gives it yeah, a bit of a beautiful luster and adds colour and gives it a bit of a shine. So I'm going to put some of this on. I think this is horrible looking stuff, but it does give it a bit of a shine. Not going to be too careful here. I'll just spill a bit on my bench. Just working it into the wood, using the grain of the wood. I'm sure expert woodworkers would look at my techniques and think, what the hell is he doing? But the way I see it, you know, this is used in your hand, and you don't want the grease and dirt from your hand to penetrate the wood and stain it. So anything that's going to seal the wood, oils and waxes that are going to seal the wood are going to stop the oils from your hands kind of staining the pick. So we work that in, leave it like that. I think we've got to leave this for I'll have to dry for about 15 minutes and then buff the wax off. So I'll probably do that, a couple of coats of that, and then I'm going to head over to the polishing wheel and we'll just give it a final polish and then call it done. So there we are after a couple of coats of beeswax, lots of gunk in the holes, but we'll clear all that out. I'm just going to give it a final buff. Now, this is the one that I was using to polish the metal. I'm not going to use that one because you can see all the dirt on there from the wood, and that's going to make our wood filthy and ingrain all that dirt into the wood. So I've got this one here that I normally use for wood. Only takes a second to change them over. And I'm not going to use the green polishing compound because, as you can appreciate, that's just going to turn our pick green. So I've got this stuff here, brown polishing, which is, yeah, use on wood. There you go. Smooth finish, yeah. It's just a polishing compound. It's just going to give us a nice shine on there, and it's a wooden colour, so that sells it to me. Anyway, let's get this quickly polished. So I've only done the back part there, just a little bit, but as you can see, we've got a nice kind of sheen on that. So what I'll do, I'll go ahead, polish all of that, and then we will do the final reveal. We did a lot of sawing, we did a lot of filing, we did a lot of gluing, we did a lot of polishing, and I did a lot of talking. But finally, we got to a stage where we have the finished pick, and there it is. Overall, really pleased with this one. It's got some nice curves on it. I do like the profile. I'll get a couple of negatives out of the way. As I mentioned in episode 2, we had the ink bleed from the permanent marker that I used, which was a mistake. And we've also got a little bit of sort of dark shadows around these holes, caused by the hole in the wood being too big for the brass inserts. This hole here does my OCD in a little bit. It should be a couple of mils higher to the top of the pick just to be more centered, but that's me being pernickety, I guess. It's just a daily pick for me, and it was also just a project for me to do as a build series for you to enjoy and see the process of putting the pick together. So there we go, they're the negatives. What are the positives? Beautiful shiny steel there, love that, love the tip. Close up at the tip there. Yeah, it's a really, really fine point tip, so that should get into a lot of the tighter keyways that I tend to pick, like the Y1 keyways, that sort of thing. The wood came out really well. The teak oil and the beeswax really bring out the colour. I think the cherry wood, when we looked at that pen blank in the first video, just looks very plain. You don't see a lot of this grain until, oh, that's really nice through there. You don't see a lot of that grain until you put the oils on. So yeah, overall came out really well. If you're at all handy, I'd really recommend giving the pick making side of the hobby a go. It's not something that I got into for a few years. I think I was a couple of years into the hobby before I started to try, and my first efforts, that's my first wood that I ever put on a pick, and as you can see, it's a bit of a horror show. I've certainly improved over the years, and that is down to practice. It's down to having the right tools, knowing the right tools to use, like the metal punch, for instance, for the steel. But it's also down to the help and advice that I've received along the way. Lots of people in the Custom Pick Makers group on Facebook have helped me along the way. Certainly Picksmith, Matt's Lockpit, XP Mods, among many others, when I've had little questions and queries about how to do things. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed watching along with this build. I've certainly enjoyed making it. I'm glad to have this one in the collection, and I'm certainly going to enjoy picking with it. I'm going to leave a little link up there to subscribe. That's always appreciated. And hit the bell notification so that you get notified when I've got new videos uploaded. I generally put one video out a week. So we've got picking videos, but also build videos like this, and the challenge locks and pin making. So yeah, lots of projects coming up. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching, and bye for now.